The text came at 11:47 p.m., a sharp vibration on a phone that only ever received encrypted orders and ransom demands. But this message was different. It was from a number he didn't recognize, typed by hands too small to understand what they were asking for. "Save my mama, please. He's hurting her." Thomas Corker stared at the screen, his tattooed fingers frozen mid-motion. He squinted at first, assuming it was spam, a prank, someone playing a dangerous game with the wrong man. Then another text appeared, shorter, more desperate. "I'm hiding. He said he'll kill her." Thomas's jaw tightened. He had witnessed violence. He had orchestrated violence. But he had never received this, a child's cry for help sent blindly into the void because she had no one else to turn to. He typed 4 words. "I'm on my way." His lieutenants looked up as he grabbed his jacket and moved toward the door with lethal purpose. "Boss, where?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because something in those words, that raw terror bleeding through a child's misspelled text, pierced through armor he'd built over 30 years. As his car carved through the midnight streets, another message lit up his phone. "Please, stranger, hurry." Thomas's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. His pulse, a sensation he'd almost forgotten existed, thundered in his ears. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. By the time he pulled onto her street, he already understood. Tonight, he wasn't arriving as Thomas Corker, the crime lord who controlled half the city's underworld. He was arriving as the answer to a prayer he'd once screamed into darkness himself, and what he found inside that house would crack open the man he'd become and resurrect the boy he'd buried alive. Stay with me, because what Thomas discovers behind that door will shatter you and then put you back together in ways you never expected. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Thomas Corker had built his empire on a single, unbreakable rule: feel nothing, trust no one, survive everything. For 32 years, he had ruled the Corker crime syndicate with calculated brutality and ice-cold precision. His name was a weapon in itself, whispered in back alleys, feared in boardrooms, respected by men twice his age who'd learned the hard way not to test him. His reputation had been forged in blood, sealed with silence, and reinforced by the kind of merciless efficiency that kept rivals awake at night wondering when, not if, he'd come for them. But sitting in his blacked-out Mercedes, racing through empty streets toward an address he'd pulled from a terrified child's text, Thomas felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Helplessness. The GPS announced, 8 minutes to destination. 8 minutes for a little girl who might not have 8 seconds. His phone buzzed again, the screen illuminated with words that made something inside his chest fracture. "I can't find Mama. There's blood everywhere. I'm scared." Thomas's foot slammed harder on the accelerator. The engine roared through the sleeping neighborhood as streetlights streaked past like falling stars. He had driven these streets 1,000 times, collecting debts, delivering warnings, erasing problems, but never like this. Never with genuine fear clawing at his throat. You see, Thomas Corker wasn't supposed to care about random children sending desperate texts to wrong numbers. He wasn't supposed to care about anything except territory expansion and profit protection. His entire existence had been carefully constructed to eliminate weakness, sentiment, vulnerability. But that night, speeding toward a crisis he couldn't control with money or violence, he found himself remembering things he'd spent 3 decades trying to destroy. 27 years earlier, Thomas had been someone else entirely. Back then, he went by Tommy, a 9-year-old boy living in a basement apartment with his mother, Elena, and a stepfather whose rage grew with every empty bottle. They were trapped, but Elena tried to shield her son from the worst of it. She worked cleaning offices at night, while Tommy went to school during the day, pretending the bruises on his arms came from playground accidents. Tommy was small, but he was brave. He'd stand between his mother and his stepfather when the shouting started, even though he knew it was useless. Elena was 34 years old when she died on their kitchen floor. Elena was 34 years old when she died on their kitchen floor. Tommy watched from the doorway, frozen, helpless, 9 years old. His stepfather's hands were still clenched into fists, his breath reeking of whiskey and rage. The neighbors heard everything, the screaming, the pleading, The terrible silence that followed. No one called for help. No one opened their door. No one came. Tommy learned something that night that would calcify into the foundation of the man he'd become. The world doesn't protect the weak, it devours them. So he stopped being weak. He stopped being Tommy. Over the next 2 decades, Thomas Corker became something else entirely, something forged in grief and tempered by calculated violence. He built the Corker syndicate from nothing, brick by bloody brick, until his name alone could end disputes before they started. He trusted no one. He felt nothing. He survived everything. Empathy became a luxury he couldn't afford. Compassion became a weapon people used against you. He buried the boy who'd prayed for rescue so deep, he convinced himself that child had never existed. Until tonight, now, racing through red lights toward Kathleen's address, Thomas felt that buried child clawing his way back to the surface. The GPS showed 6 minutes. Kathleen's desperate words burned on his phone screen. "I can't find Mama. There's blood everywhere." Thomas's vision blurred. His hands trembled, a sensation he hadn't experienced since he was 9. He whispered into the darkness of his car, a promise to a ghost and a prayer to a stranger. Not again. Not tonight. The accelerator hit the floor. The Lewis home looked ordinary from the outside, a small 2-story with peeling paint and a flickering porch light. But the sounds bleeding through the walls told a different story. Crash. Furniture splintering. "Please. Brent, please stop." Sarah's voice, raw with terror. "Shut up," a man's roar, thick with substances and fury. Upstairs, hidden in her bedroom closet behind winter coats that smelled like her mama's perfume, Kathleen Lewis clutched her phone with trembling hands. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she typed one final message. "Please, stranger, don't leave me." She hit send and held her breath, listening to her mama's sobs below. Thomas arrived like a shadow, no sirens, no announcement, just lethal silence. He approached the front door, which hung half open, and stepped inside. The smell hit him immediately. Blood, fear, desperation. His eyes adjusted to the dim light. The living room was chaos. Overturned furniture, shattered picture frames, crimson smears across the wallpaper. And there, collapsed near the sofa, was Sarah Lewis. Unconscious, bruises blooming across her face and arms, but breathing shallow, pained breaths that meant she was still fighting. Thomas's gaze caught on the photographs scattered across the floor. A woman and a little girl at the beach, birthday cakes, school photos, a home fragile and precious destroyed by a monster's hands. Then he heard it. "Where are you, you little brat?" Brent's voice, coming from upstairs. "Come out now." Something ancient and volcanic erupted in Thomas's chest. His rage didn't burn. It froze. And frozen rage was far more dangerous. Thomas moved up the stairs like smoke, silent, inevitable, deadly. Each step was measured, predatory. He'd perfected this approach over decades. The calm before annihilation. Down the hallway, Brent kicked open doors, his rage unraveling into panic. "I know you're here somewhere." Inside her closet, Kathleen pressed herself against the back wall, making herself as small as possible. She heard footsteps closer now and squeezed her eyes shut. "Please," she whispered into the darkness. "Help my mama. Please." The closet door opened, but the hand that reached in wasn't Brent's. Thomas knelt at the threshold, his imposing frame somehow gentle in this moment. Kathleen looked up at him, tear-streaked face, trembling lips, eyes wide with terror that hadn't quite killed hope. She studied his face, the scars, the hard angles, the darkness that lived behind his eyes. "Are you the man from the phone?" Her voice barely audible. Thomas nodded once, and something inside him, something he'd welded shut with blood and steel, shattered completely. This child. This terrified, brave little girl who'd texted a stranger because she had no one else. She looked exactly like he'd felt 27 years ago. Small, scared, desperate, alone. Thomas reached for her. "I've got you." Kathleen collapsed into his arms. He lifted her carefully, turning her face into his chest as he carried her downstairs, shielding her eyes from her mother's blood, from the wreckage of her home. She clung to him, small hands gripping his jacket like a lifeline. And Thomas Corker, A man who hadn't trusted or been trusted in 30 years felt something he thought had died with his mother. Purpose. Thomas had just set Kathleen on the couch when Brent stumbled down the stairs, a broken bottle clutched in his shaking hand. Who the hell? Then he saw Thomas's face. The color drained from Brent's features. His grip faltered. Every street-level dealer in this city knew that face, knew the tattoos crawling up his neck, knew the name. Corker, Brent whispered, stepping back. Thomas moved forward with terrifying calm, each step deliberate, no rush, no hesitation. Predator closing distance. Brent swung wildly, the bottle arcing toward Thomas's face. Thomas caught his wrist mid-swing, twisted, and the weapon shattered against the wall. Brent screamed. Thomas drove his fist into Brent's ribs once, twice feeling bones crack beneath his knuckles. Every punch carried 30 years of buried rage. Every strike was for his mother, for himself, for every child who ever prayed into darkness and heard nothing back. Brent collapsed, gasping, blood bubbling from his split lip. He tried crawling away. Thomas planted his boot on Brent's throat. Not hard enough to crush yet, but enough to communicate the absolute power dynamic. Brent's eyes bulged. His hands clawed uselessly at Thomas's leg. From the couch, Kathleen watched with wide, terrified eyes, waiting to see if this stranger would become another monster. Thomas felt her gaze, felt the weight of what this moment meant. He leaned down, applying just enough pressure to make Brent choke, and whispered words that turned the man's blood to ice. "You hurt a child. That makes you mine." He lifted his boot. Barely. Brent stared up at Thomas, waiting for the killing blow. His entire body trembled. This was Thomas Corker, the man who'd buried rivals in construction foundations, who made people disappear without a trace. Death was certain, but Thomas didn't reach for a weapon. Instead, he spoke with glacial precision. "You have 24 hours to leave this state. Take nothing but your clothes. Speak to no one." Brent's eyes widened in confusion. Thomas crouched lower, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more violent than his fist. "If I ever hear your name again in a bar, on a police report, whispered in a back alley, I won't just kill you, Brent. I'll erase you. Your family won't find a body. Your friends won't remember your face. You'll become a ghost story nobody believes." He straightened. 24 hours. Starting now. Brent scrambled backward, then stumbled toward the door, blood trailing behind him. He knew Thomas's word was absolute law in this city's underworld. Exile was mercy. It was also a curse. The door slammed. Silence filled the house. Thomas moved immediately to Sarah, kneeling beside her unconscious form. His hands still bloodied from Brent checked her pulse with surprising gentleness. "Is Mama going to die?" Kathleen's small voice broke from the couch. Thomas looked at her, and for the first time in 30 years, made a promise he intended to keep. "No, I won't let that happen." He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Dr. Green, I need you. Now." Dr. Green arrived within 20 minutes, a thin man with steady hands, who'd learned long ago not to ask questions when Thomas Corker called. He worked quickly, cleaning Sarah's wounds, checking for internal bleeding, administering pain medication. "She needs a hospital," he murmured, "but she'll survive." Throughout the entire examination, Kathleen sat beside Thomas on the couch, her small hand wrapped around two of his fingers. She hadn't let go since he'd carried her downstairs. Thomas didn't pull away. He felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest, something that felt dangerously close to responsibility, to protectiveness, to purpose. When Dr. Green finished, Thomas made 3 phone calls. First, a secure apartment in a building he owned, furnished, safe, anonymous. Second, his most trusted lieutenant, Brent Coleman. "I want him gone from every database, every street corner, every memory. Make him a ghost." Third, his accountant. "Set up a medical fund. Route it through offshore accounts. The recipient never learns the source." By dawn, Sarah and Kathleen would have a new beginning. As Dr. Green packed his supplies, Kathleen looked up at Thomas with red-rimmed eyes. Will you ever come visit us?" Thomas hesitated. Every instinct screamed that attachment was weakness, that caring was dangerous. But then he remembered. Not again. Not tonight. He looked down at this brave little girl who'd texted a stranger because she had no one else, and nodded. Yeah, I'll visit. Her smile, small, fragile, hopeful, cracked something open in him that had been sealed for decades. Weeks blurred into a routine Thomas never expected to have. Tuesday evenings, he'd arrive at the apartment with groceries, real food, not the takeout Sarah could barely afford. Thursday afternoons, he'd check Kathleen's homework, his tattooed fingers surprisingly patient as he helped with multiplication tables. Sarah was wary at first. Who wouldn't be? A mafia boss appearing in your life, claiming to want nothing in return. It defied logic. But she'd watched him kneel beside her daughter, seen the way his hands trembled when Kathleen smiled, witnessed how he'd turn away when emotion threatened to crack his carefully constructed armor. He'd saved their lives. And somehow, they were saving his. Kathleen began to smile again, genuine smiles that reached her eyes. She'd run to the door when Thomas knocked, chattering about school, about friends, about the stray cat she'd named Guardian. Like you, she'd said simply. Thomas's lieutenants noticed the change. Their boss, ruthless, calculating, untouchable, had become. Softer? No. More purposeful. During a syndicate meeting, Thomas issued a new directive, his voice leaving no room for debate. New rule, effective immediately. No harm comes to women or children. Ever. Anyone breaks this, they answer to me personally. His men exchanged glances but nodded. They understood. On the streets, whispers spread through the criminal underworld. Thomas Corker has something to protect now. That doesn't make him weaker. It makes him lethal. Because a man with nothing to lose is dangerous. But a man with everything to protect? He's unstoppable. 3 weeks after that night, Sarah was back in the hospital for follow-up surgery. Thomas sat beside Kathleen in the waiting room, her legs swinging from the too-tall chair. She'd been quiet for a while, then turned to him with those impossibly honest eyes. Why did you come when I texted you? Thomas could have lied, should have lied, but something about this child demanded truth. Because once, his voice caught. I needed someone to come for me. No one did. Kathleen's small hand found his. She squeezed gently. I'm glad you came for me. 4 simple words. They shouldn't have meant everything, but they did. Silence settled between them, comfortable, safe. Then Kathleen leaned against his arm, her voice small and sleepy. Will you stay until Mama wakes up? Thomas Corker, a man who'd built an empire on never promising anything, never committing, never caring, felt something shift fundamentally inside him. He looked down at this brave little girl who'd texted a stranger in her darkest moment, who trusted him when trust should have been impossible. As long as you need me. His throat tightened. I'm here. Kathleen's eyes fluttered closed, still holding his hand, and Thomas understood with perfect clarity. He was no longer the monster his past had created. He'd become something far more dangerous, a man with purpose, a protector born from darkness. He made a silent vow to Kathleen, to himself, to the boy he'd once been. No child will ever beg for help and be ignored again. Not in my city. Not while I'm still breathing. If this story moved you, we'd be honored if you'd hit that subscribe button. Don't miss our upcoming